The moment the CEO laughed in my face and called me just an intern, I knew I'd bury him with the truth. My name is Elias Grant, 23 years old, fresh out of business school, and the youngest data analyst trainee at Harlan Technologies, a billion-dollar software corporation built like a shining monument to innovation. I wasn't supposed to matter. At least that's what Victor Hale, the CEO, believed. To him, interns were disposable coffer-fetching nobodies, bodies to fill the office, not minds to contribute. But he had no idea who he was dismissing. The first time I met Victor was in the glass-lined boardroom on the 47th floor. I sat quiet near the wall, shadowed by people who earned more in a quarter than I had in my life. Victor walked in like he owned gravity, suit crisp, smile sharp, eyes colder than the marble floor. He shook hands with directors, shareholders, partners, but when his gaze reached me, it flicked away like I was dirt on his shoe. "You," he said without looking fully at me, "make sure everyone's coffee is topped off before we begin." I opened my mouth, ready to correct him, but my supervisor nudged me under the table. "Not now." So I bit my tongue and obeyed, heart burning hotter with every steaming cup I placed. I wasn't a barista. I wasn't a nobody. I had been hired specifically for my research into cybersecurity vulnerabilities, research Victor himself had approved. But he didn't remember me. Or maybe, like so many in power, he simply didn't care. Over the next week, Victor's disregard became routine. He'd ask me to run errands, retrieve lunch orders, print paperwork. In meetings he spoke over me, silenced me, once even referred to me as the kid. Yet I kept working, quietly, meticulously, because I noticed something no one else seemed to see. Harlan Tech's financial system was bleeding money. Tiny discrepancies. Unusual vendor payouts. Transaction timestamps that didn't align. Almost invisible, unless you knew where to look. And I did. Every night after hours, I remained in the office long after others left, running quiet audits, cross-checking files against archived data. I wasn't hunting Victor. Not yet. I was just trying to understand what was wrong. But the deeper I dug, the more impossible it became to ignore. Money was disappearing in patterns too deliberate to be error. Someone was siphoning millions. And the documents leading those transactions all traced back to a digital signature belonging to one person. Victor Hale. I didn't know it then, but that discovery would ignite the downfall of the man who thought I was invisible. And in the quiet hum of the office at 1 a.m., as the city glowed below like circuits under glass, I felt something new crawl into my bones. Not excitement, but danger. The days that followed were a slow burn, like watching a fuse crawl towards something explosive, though I didn't yet know how big the blast would be. Victor remained dismissive, his voice always dipped in condescension when it landed on me. But it wasn't just how he treated me, it was who he treated well. Her name was Sienna Rhodes, the senior HR director, and the only person I'd ever seen Victor soften for. He never snapped at her, never cut her down. In meetings, he deferred to her opinions like they were gospel. The rest of us, we were replaceable organs. But Sienna, she was the heartbeat, at least to him. I once overheard them in his office, door cracked open just enough for voices to slip out. "We need to move quietly," Victor murmured, tone unusually gentle. Sienna replied in a rushed whisper, "I've already changed the access logs. No one will trace it." My spine tightened. Changed access logs. Moved quietly. What? Before I could lean closer, Victor's shadow passed by the frosted glass, and I scrambled away like a roach from light, pulse hammering. That night I went home exhausted, not physically, but mentally twisted into knots. I worked hard, harder than any intern on record. I was logging extra hours, compiling data trails, trying to understand the bleeding accounts. But each new file I opened felt like another needle in my skull. Was Victor stealing? Was Sienna helping him? Or was I just paranoid? An overworked intern looking for patterns in static? The tension spread into my life like ink in water. I stopped going out with friends, stopped answering calls from my parents. Meals became cold takeout eaten over glowing spreadsheets. Sleep came only when my body collapsed, and even then I dreamed in numbers. The missing 3 million, the shifted logs, the overwritten files. On Friday, I made the mistake of questioning Victor directly. I caught him in the hallway, phone pressed to his ear. His voice was low, clipped. Yes. By Monday. No, it won't be traced. My chest tightened. He hung up, and I swallowed my fear. Sir, about the vendor payouts. He turned slowly, like a lion deciding whether to kill or ignore. What vendor payouts? He asked, feigning confusion too smoothly. Well, I've noticed irregularities, I stammered. I could show you if. He stepped forward, close enough that I could smell polished leather and minted cologne. You're an intern, he said softly. Don't overstep. And he walked away. That moment should have been a warning. But instead, I took it as permission to dig deeper. Because for the first time, I wasn't just suspicious. I was afraid, and curiosity thrives on fear like fire on air. The truth hit me like a fist I never saw coming. It was late again, past midnight, office empty, city breathing in cold blue pulses beyond the windows. I was neck deep in ledger exports, chasing anomalies like ghosts. I almost gave up, eyes burning, head heavy, when I found it, one folder buried under layers of mislabeled documents. Harland Internal. Executive discretion. I shouldn't have had access. I definitely shouldn't have clicked. But I did. And what unfolded on my screen chilled every vein in my body. There were offshore accounts, 6 of them. Millions funneled through fake vendors registered to shell corporations. Financial reports doctored, quarterly losses hidden, and stamped across every approval. V. Hale, verified authorization. Victor wasn't just negligent. He was robbing his own company blind. My stomach twisted. I scrolled further, uncovering internal memos to Sienna, coded, but clear enough when lined up. Shift payments before audit cycle. Delete entries after transfer. Intern access restricted. He's been snooping. My name appeared in one message. Not Elias Grant. Just the intern. Not even worth remembering. He knew I was digging. He just didn't know how much I'd already uncovered. My chair rolled back as if I'd been shot. All the red flags flashed together now. The whispers, the favoritism, the altered logs, the smirk every time he dismissed me like trash. Victor wasn't just arrogant. He was criminal. And if this went public, Harland Tech would implode from the inside. My pulse thrashed against my ribs. Should I tell someone? Go to legal? Alert the board? But another file caught my eye. Board removal strategy. Mitigation. My trembling fingers opened it. This wasn't just embezzlement. Victor planned to blame losses on investor fraud, crash the company stock, and buy back controlling shares at pennies. A reset. A purge. Thousands of employees, families, careers, would be collateral damage. Disposable. Just like me. He wanted power. Total power. My mouth tasted like metal. The CEO who laughed at me was about to burn the company to the ground. I leaned back, hands shaking violently, the weight of it crushing me. It wasn't just betrayal of me, it was betrayal of everyone who trusted him, who built Harland from fluorescent-lit nights and burnout. For a long moment, I just sat there, numb, staring at proof that could destroy him. But with that proof came danger. If he realized what I knew, if he suspected I had evidence, I wouldn't be just an intern anymore. I'd be a threat. And threats get eliminated. Yet even through the fear, something else ignited inside me. A spark of defiance. Of justice. Maybe vengeance. Victor Hale thought I was invisible. He was about to learn how bright a ghost could burn. I didn't go home that night. I just sat there in the dark, surrounded by screens glowing like accusation. Proof of Victor's theft stared at me from every open window, every line of code, every forged signature. The weight of it felt suffocating, but beneath that crushing fear, something sturdier began to form. Resolve. At first, it was small, just a pinprick of stubbornness. A voice saying he doesn't get to win. But it grew, slowly, like steel hardening under heat. Victor thought I was nothing. Disposable. Forgettable. But I'd uncovered everything. I had receipts. Data trails. emails. Enough to set the entire executive floor on fire. And no one even knew I existed. That anonymity, that invisibility he'd forced on me, was suddenly my greatest weapon. The turning point came when my phone lit up, vibrating against my desk. It was a message from my mother. "How's the internship, honey? We're proud of you." I stared at those words until my throat tightened. Proud. They believed I was building a future here. They believed I belonged in that skyscraper, that I was growing into the man they'd raised me to be. But if Victor pulled off his scheme, if Haaland collapsed and I stayed silent, what kind of man would I become? A coward. A bystander. A footnote. I couldn't live with that. Victor Hale may have stolen millions, but what he really tried to steal was something deeper. My sense of worth, my belief that I mattered. And that, more than the money, was the betrayal I couldn't forgive. So I wiped my eyes, inhaled steady, and made a decision that turned the fear into fire. I would take him down. Not recklessly. Not alone. I'd need evidence packaged cleanly. Files mirrored to external drives. Video. Audit trails. Testimony. If I was going after a billionaire CEO, I needed to strike with the kind of precision he wouldn't see coming, not until it was too late. I transferred every incriminating document to a secure offline hard drive. Duplicated it to cloud storage under encrypted aliases. Scheduled backups. Redundancies on redundancies. If Victor tried to bury the truth, it would rise 1,000 times over. By the time the sun bled into the horizon, I felt different. No longer intimidated. No longer small. He thought I was just an intern. But interns learn fast. Interns watch quietly. Interns see everything. And now I wasn't just watching, I was preparing. Because one day soon, Victor Hale would look me in the eyes and finally remember my name. And that day, I'd be holding the evidence that would end him. My plan wasn't vengeance in the comic book sense. It was logistics. A quiet, methodical unmasking that required patience, paperwork, and an ugly willingness to be invisible until the right moment. I hid 3 encrypted copies of the files, one on a physical hard drive stashed in a safety deposit box, one on a cloud account under false identity, and one mirrored to a disposable laptop I'd bought with cash. I sorted the folders with timestamps, checksums, and cross-references so any alteration would show like a scar. If Victor tried to delete a file, the copies would scream. Numbers alone could be brushed off as a spreadsheet error. So I dug for human fingerprints, emails, chat logs, meeting invites. I pulled the vendor registry, matched shell company addresses to PO boxes, and found the little overlaps. The same forwarding service used for 3 different shell corporations, an accountant's name appearing in 2 unrelated memos. I printed copies and photographed them. Corroboration turned suspicion into proof. There were people who knew Victor as a public face, not a fraudster, junior auditors, a nervous compliance officer named Matteo, and a bored IT admin who loved puzzles. I fed them innocuous questions. Have you seen vendor X? Did audit close on time last quarter? Their puzzled answers told me where cover-ups had been staged. None of them knew what I was doing. I needed allies, not martyrs. Victor would move his money around just before audit windows. So I created a fake vendor, an innocuous-sounding LLC with a plausible invoice and a bank account routed to a monitored place. I submitted a staged test payment through our procurement sandbox, then watched to see who authorized it and how fast it moved. When the phantom payment appeared in the wrong account, the logs lit up, manual overrides, hurried approvals, Sienna's username in the access list at 2:13 a.m. Victor's plan hinged on the next quarterly report and an opaque mitigation letter he could brand as investor fraud. I needed to hit the board first. So I drafted a concise, damning dossier, executive summary up front, evidence in appendices, a timeline anyone could follow. I encrypted it, signed it with anonymous keys, and scheduled delivery through a whistleblower portal regulated by the exchange. Regulators would get a copy, the board would get a copy, an external forensic firm would be see-sit. All the while, Victor strutted through the office like a man unconcerned with his fate. He threw lavish lunches. He gave motivational speeches about bold moves. Sienna sat at his side, smiling like a queen. The tension grew a slow, taut wire. Every time I passed Victor in the corridor, he smiled and asked about the intern's progress. He still thought me expendable. He still thought the world was his to burn and rebuild. I had one more move left, one that would force his hand and ensure the forensic alarms couldn't be silenced. I placed a single, tiny file on our internal server, a decoy audit flagged for executive review, timestamped to go live the day before the board meeting. Then I waited, hand on the relay switch, knowing that when it flipped, nothing would be the same. The trigger was small. A digital whisper. At 9:42 a.m. on a Tuesday, my decoy audit report was opened under Victor Hale's credentials. The trap had sprung. He must have sensed something was wrong, because by noon, emergency meetings were called, files started disappearing from shared servers, and access restrictions multiplied like fire doors slamming shut. I watched from my corner desk, unseen, a ghost with a detonator. Victor thought he found the leak. He had no idea the floor beneath him was already gone. At 3:15 p.m., the quarterly board meeting began. Mahogany table polished like a mirror, the skyline sharpening into gold behind shadowed executives. Victor entered smiling, confident, a king addressing loyal subjects. I sat along the wall, just an intern, notebook in hand, pretending to belong nowhere. He began his pitch, sweeping gestures, fabricated optimism, talk of strategic setbacks and investor disruptions. His voice was silk-wrapped poison. Then his screen flickered. A glitch. Then another. And then, my whistleblower report replaced his slides entirely. Offshore accounts. Shell vendors. Fraudulent transfers. Every stolen cent exposed in razor-sharp clarity. My dossier illuminated the room like a flare gun fired in darkness. The board erupted. Shouts, gasps, chairs scraping. Victor froze mid-sentence, smile evaporating, eyes wide like a man watching the ground open beneath him. Sienna went pale, hand clamped around her tablet. And I stood. For the first time, all eyes were on me. I believe, I said, voice steady despite the quake in my veins. The company deserves the truth. A dead silence fell. You. Victor choked, laughing without breath. You did this. You're nobody. You're just an intern. I stepped forward. An intern who audited your theft. Who traced every transfer. Who backed up every file, externally, internally, and federally. Right on cue, the boardroom doors burst open. Regulators. Federal auditors. Securities investigators. My scheduled delivery had reached them exactly 1 hour earlier. Panic cracked across Victor's face like glass under a hammer. He lunged toward his laptop, desperate to shut it down, but 2 agents blocked his path. Sienna tried to slip out, quiet, fast, but she didn't make it 3 steps before another agent intercepted her. The mighty CEO's voice finally broke. You don't understand. I built this company. I earned this power. No, I said softly. You stole it. As he was handcuffed, he looked at me, really looked, for the first time. Recognition settled slow and bitter. Elias Grant. The intern he dismissed. The one he underestimated. The one holding the evidence that ended him. Cameras flashed. Reporters crowded outside glass walls like vultures. Victor Hale's empire collapsed in real time, drowning under the truth he thought no one would ever uncover. I walked out of that boardroom not as a nobody, but as the person who took down the CEO who thought I was less than nothing. And my revenge was complete. The world didn't end with the board meeting. But Victor Hale's did. News spread like wildfire, financial networks, industry journals, social feeds ignited with headlines about the CEO who siphoned millions from his own company. Cameras caught him being escorted through Harlan's lobby, wrists pinned behind his back, reporters shouting questions he didn't dare answer. His empire, built on arrogance and stolen money, crumbled beneath the weight of evidence he believed I was too insignificant to uncover. Sienna resigned before she could be removed, though resignation didn't save her. Charges followed: fraud, collusion, obstruction. Watching her lawyer lead her through that same revolving door Victor once owned felt like watching a shadow swallow itself. Harlan Tech survived. Barely. Investors withdrew, stocks plunged, but the truth had come out early enough to stop total collapse. When the board launched a recovery initiative, they asked me to stay, not as an intern fetching coffee, but as an official cybersecurity analyst. My office is small but mine. My badge doesn't say intern anymore. It says Elias Grant, Digital Forensics Lead. Funny how the title changes everything. Co-workers who once brushed past me now shake my hand, ask my opinion. Matteo from compliance stops by often. Still stunned I was the whistleblower. The IT admin sends me puzzles like trophies. Even the partners who used to overlook me now speak to me by name. Not the intern. Not invisible. Not expendable. Some wounds remain, those long nights hunched over stolen numbers, the humiliation, the self-doubt Victor planted in me like poison. But scabs heal. And scars. Scars are proof we survived. A few months later, I attended Victor's sentencing. He avoided eye contact, shoulders drawn small beneath all that expensive fabric. The judge read charges like scripture: embezzlement, securities fraud, tax evasion. Years. Decades. When they asked if I had anything to say, I stood, not for revenge, but closure. You thought I was just an intern, I told him. But the difference between an intern and a CEO is simple. A CEO can fall. An intern can rise. His jaw tightened. That was enough. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt the weight lift, not soft, but sharp like chains snapping. I hadn't just ended his career. I'd reclaimed my own worth. Poetic justice isn't loud. Sometimes it's just the sound of a door closing behind the person who underestimated you. If you've ever been dismissed, ignored, or betrayed by someone in power, tell me in the comments. I want to hear your story. And if you enjoyed this journey, make sure to like, subscribe, and follow. Because the quiet ones, the underestimated ones, we rise the highest.